King Charles spent a short period of time in hospital today after experiencing the temporary side effects of his cancer treatment.
As King Charles fights for his life behind palace walls, Queen Camilla quietly boards a plane to Florence, leaving Britain stunned and the monarchy divided. Her departure shocks the nation, ignites public outrage, and deepens the growing rift inside the royal family. In a moment when the monarchy cries out for unity, Camilla's absence speaks louder than any proclamation, leaving the public to ask, has Britain's queen chosen retreat over responsibility? At exactly 10:01 a.m. on the 9th of October 2025, Clarence House issued a terse but chilling bulletin. His Majesty King Charles III continues to receive specialist care for his ongoing condition. Physicians have advised an indefinite pause from public duties. The king remains under constant observation. Within minutes, major news outlets flashed breaking banners. King's condition stable, but absence indefinite. Yet, behind the polished language, the truth rippled quickly through political circles and across a stunned public. Britain's monarch was no longer able to carry out his role, and for the first time in modern history, no formal abdication had been declared. The gravity of the moment was not lost on Prince William. Just 3 hours after the palace statement, he stepped into the public eye with quiet urgency, delivering a prepared statement outside Kensington Palace. Dressed in navy, voice calm but clipped, he said, "My father's strength remains undiminished in spirit. However, his physicians have strongly advised continued rest and seclusion. At His Majesty's request, I will oversee state responsibilities until such time as his condition improves." There was no mention of the word regency, but the subtext was unmistakable. A living monarch had quietly stepped back, and the heir had stepped in. Inside royal and political circles, this transition had long been anticipated. What wasn't expected was, who would resist it, and how? Within hours of the prince's address, sources confirmed that Queen Camilla had left Buckingham Palace the previous evening, boarding a private helicopter to her personal residence, Ray Mill House in Wiltshire. Palace aides described the move as pre-scheduled, but the timing struck many as jarring. The Queen was not by the King's side. She was not in London. Her office issued a brisk follow-up. Her Majesty is temporarily based at her private residence while continuing to support His Majesty remotely. The Queen and her son, Tom Parker Bowles, have both assumed significant responsibilities in ensuring continuity of royal support functions. That phrasing, significant responsibilities, raised alarm bells across Whitehall. According to 3 senior civil service sources, Camilla had, in recent weeks, begun pushing internally for a formal civil advisory role to be granted to her son, Tom. The proposal, a new post titled Special Advisor to the Queen Consort on Civic Engagement, essentially granting Tom a non-royal but influential voice within palace operations. King Charles had reportedly rejected the request not once, but 3 separate times, most recently in August after a private dinner at Sandringham. According to a well-placed courtier, the king had been firm. He is not a working royal, that's the end of it. But now, with the king's condition weakening, Camilla's strategy appeared to shift. Insiders confirmed that Tom had recently begun attending meetings inside the palace's East Wing, where press and protocol teams are typically briefed. He was not there in any official capacity, and yet he was there. One senior aide, speaking anonymously, said, "It was subtle at first. Then it became clear he was positioning himself as a gatekeeper, especially around the Queen's movements and communications." That shift didn't go unnoticed by Prince William or Princess Anne. Within the same 24-hour news cycle, Princess Anne quietly visited Sandringham to meet with the King's private physician, Sir Hugh Fitzjames. The palace described it as routine, but insiders say Anne's real purpose was to reassert royal oversight. A longtime stalwart of the crown, Anne has reportedly grown deeply concerned by what one source called Camilla's creeping autonomy. Meanwhile, public sentiment began to crystallize. By the afternoon of October 9, the hashtag #WhereIsTheQueen was trending across X, formerly Twitter, accompanied by a viral clip of King Charles, during his last public outing in Birmingham, visibly frail, gripping his walking stick, Camilla whispering to him just before he stumbles slightly off balance. The narrative began to take shape without the palace's help. Royal commentator Simon Ellison put it bluntly on BBC Newsnight. There is a leadership vacuum not just constitutional, but emotional, and the Queen Consort's absence is deafening. Amid growing criticism, Camilla's team issued a pre-recorded video the next morning from Ray Mill House. Seated beside a fireplace, the Queen looked solemn but resolute. "His Majesty's recovery remains our family's priority. My son and I have taken on duties to ensure the work of the Crown continues unbroken. That is our shared burden and our shared honor." While some praised her composure, others were incensed by the phrase, "my son and I." Editorials across British media questioned why Tom Parker Bowles, a food critic with no constitutional standing, was being referenced in the context of royal stewardship. The Guardian's editorial headline read, "Crisis or opportunity? The Queen must choose her role, not her heir." That same day, in a closed-door meeting with senior palace staff, Prince William reportedly pushed back against Camilla's approach. According to a palace source, William made it clear, Tom may advise his mother, but he does not speak for the monarchy. By the end of that week, Tom Parker Bowles released a rare written statement to the press. "I am not a royal, nor do I seek to be. My role is purely civil, assisting the Queen Consort in personal engagements and charitable strategy. I respect the boundaries of constitutional governance." But by then, the damage was done. The optics were unmistakable. A queen removed from the bedside of a critically ill monarch, a son stepping into meetings with no title, and a crown increasingly operating under the quiet, steady hand of William and Anne. As the palace press office scrambled to contain speculation, one thing had become clear. This was not just a story of illness, it was a story of succession, sovereignty, and control. And the question echoing across Britain was no longer just, "How is the king?" It was, "Who's really in charge?" The roots of Britain's royal uncertainty stretch back far earlier than the October bulletins suggest. Quietly, almost invisibly, the reign of Charles III began to fray not from scandal or misstep, but from something far more relentless: illness. As early as January 2024, King Charles had been admitted to Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge for what was then described as a minor urological procedure. The official line referenced an enlarged prostate, a condition common among men his age. Yet what emerged during routine imaging changed everything. Multiple sources within Addenbrooke's confirmed that scans revealed abnormal lymphatic activity, prompting the king's physician, Sir Hugh Fitzjames, to order immediate oncological assessment. The resulting diagnosis, lymphoma, was kept from the public. Within palace walls, however, it triggered the quiet activation of Operation Continuity, a rarely discussed protocol designed to safeguard the monarchy should the sovereign become incapacitated. Under that plan, key duties would begin transitioning to Prince William and Princess Anne, both designated as lead counselors of state. The goal: stability without spectacle. But outside of officialdom, another plan was forming, one led not by protocol, but by Queen Camilla. Palace insiders revealed that between February and April, Camilla began hosting informal strategy sessions at Ray Mill House, her private estate in Wiltshire. Attendees included senior members of her communications team and, crucially, her son, Tom Parker Bowles. While technically a private citizen, Tom's role in these meetings grew increasingly formal. Witnesses describe him maintaining notes, delegating media instructions, and requesting data on public sentiment regarding the Queen's public image. This subtle consolidation of influence soon extended into palace operations. One aide noted, "Suddenly, you needed Camilla's sign-off to speak to the king even for briefings, and if you weren't on Tom's trusted list, you didn't get through." By May, while King Charles was undergoing targeted immunotherapy, including monoclonal antibody treatments, Camilla had taken de facto control of all public-facing decisions. She personally reviewed guest lists for royal receptions, oversaw the king's daily dietary protocols, and, most controversially, restricted access to Charles, even among family members. Princess Anne, long regarded as the monarchy's backbone, became visibly alarmed. At a June meeting of senior courtiers at St. James's Palace, Anne reportedly demanded a continuity review, a rarely invoked exercise meant to reassess the sovereign's ability to fulfill constitutional functions. The meeting resulted in an update to the Councillors of State schedule, naming William and Anne as primary signatories on key documents. Charles's signature would no longer be required for certain ceremonial and diplomatic duties. Still, Camilla resisted the appearance of retreat. Through the summer, she maintained that the king was recovering well and in excellent spirits. Yet Charles canceled 11 public engagements between July and September, including 2 high-profile overseas visits and 3 charitable patronage ceremonies. The contradiction between Camilla's statements and the king's absence drew criticism, prompting William's office to step in. Rather than challenge the Queen Consort directly, William and Anne quietly began assuming more prominent roles. William chaired Privy Council briefings once exclusive to the sovereign, while Anne managed interdepartmental communication between the palace and Westminster. Tom, meanwhile, remained in the background, but only barely. By late August, he had begun describing himself in press correspondence as a civil advisor to the Queen Consort, despite holding no official title or appointment. This escalation did not go unnoticed. A memo circulated within the Cabinet Office in early September flagged a concerning drift between constitutional precedent and informal influence within the royal household. Though the document was marked confidential, its contents were eventually leaked to the Times, triggering a flurry of headlines. Who speaks for the crown, the heir, or the consort? The palace responded with typical restraint, issuing a statement reaffirming that His Majesty's government remains in regular contact with the Prince of Wales, the designated lead counsellor of state. But tensions were no longer simmering, they were boiling. Multiple insiders recount a tense closed-door exchange between William's private secretary, Jean-Christophe Gray, and Camilla's senior aide. The disagreement centered on Tom's growing role in palace media strategy. According to one witness, William's office didn't object to Tom supporting his mother personally, but when it crossed into messaging for the monarchy, that's when the gloves came off. In a rare move, Princess Anne intervened directly. Known for her pragmatism and zero tolerance for political games, she summoned senior aides from both camps and laid down a simple line: "We do not politicize illness, and we do not confuse family with function." By late September, the king's condition had worsened. Blood panels showed reduced lymphocyte counts, elevated toxicity markers, and early-stage renal stress. Charles, according to Addenbrook's reports, was clinically fragile. Still, Camilla refused to relinquish control. On September 29, she rejected William's suggestion to bring in an external medical review board. Instead, she doubled down, issuing an internal directive that all hospital visitation requests, even from senior royals, be cleared through her office. The blowback was immediate. Veteran royal correspondent Jude Mallory wrote, "What began as spousal protectiveness is now being perceived as strategic gatekeeping, and the monarchy does not tolerate ambiguity." Oh. As October arrived, Britain stood at a threshold, a monarch hidden from view, a queen consort under fire, a son assuming power without proclamation, and a public caught between tradition and transition. The question was no longer whether the crown was changing. It was how quietly and how fast. It was just under 47 seconds long, shaky, grainy, filmed from behind a hedge by an unknown source. But when footage of King Charles surfaced on the 3rd of October 2025, it upended months of palace messaging and sparked a national reckoning. The video, shot outside Sandringham House, showed the monarch stepping out of a black vehicle. Aides on either side supported him gently as he moved pale, noticeably thinner, his right hand trembling. Queen Camilla could be seen whispering something as he briefly stumbled. His expression was vacant, his motion slow. Within hours, the footage went viral across platforms. The hashtag number "The King We Saw" trended globally. For many Britons, this was the moment the reality of the king's condition became undeniable. The palace swiftly condemned the leak, calling it a gross invasion of privacy. But the public, already weary of euphemisms like "under medical supervision" and "guided by advice," saw something else: truth. And that truth cut through carefully worded press statements and rehearsed video addresses. Public commentary turned furious, not toward the king, but toward those perceived to be shielding him from scrutiny. Camilla, already criticized for her absence from the king's side, faced renewed outrage. Even more damaging was a media firestorm around Tom Parker Bowles. Leaked emails revealed he had advised a PR firm to protect Her Majesty's narrative from being overshadowed by Regency speculation. The implication: he was managing optics, not honoring reality. Headlines exploded. Who's advising whom? The Times. Camilla's crisis of credibility. The Guardian. Food critic turned palace power broker? The Mirror. In the wake of mounting criticism, William's office remained silent until it didn't. On October 5, 2 days after the leak, William delivered a brief but potent statement outside Clarence House. "My father's health has entered a stage that requires privacy, care, and constitutional stability. We remain committed to service with compassion and transparency." It was less than 90 seconds, but every word mattered. For those fluent in royal communications, the phrase "constitutional stability" marked a seismic shift. That same evening, the Sunday Times revealed that government officials had begun reviewing Regency contingency protocols under the project name Silver Branch. Though unnamed in the article, sources confirmed that Princess Anne and William had been briefed on the legal mechanics should the king remain unable to serve by year's end. The public, too, had reached a conclusion. An overnight YouGov poll showed 77% of respondents now favored Prince William, taking over all royal duties, temporarily. Support for Camilla's role dropped to an all-time low of 29%. Amid it all, Princess Catherine remained notably silent, but her appearances grew more frequent. At a children's charity in Manchester, she said quietly to a patient, "Hope can live alongside fear." The words were personal and political. In a palace gripped by whispers and division, Catherine offered something else: clarity. And as Britain braced for what lay ahead, one truth became impossible to ignore. The king had vanished from sight, but the crown had already begun to shift, and the nation was watching. By the second week of October, what had begun as subtle tensions within the royal household had crystallized into a quiet constitutional standoff. On one side stood Prince William and Princess Anne, quietly coordinating state duties in the name of a monarch who no longer appeared in public. On the other, Queen Camilla, increasingly isolated, yet determined to assert influence, not only for herself, but, controversially, for her son. Inside Sandringham, the division was no longer whispered about. According to one senior official, the tone of internal meetings had become controlled, courteous, and cold. The king's absence from daily operations created a vacuum of authority, one that was being filled not by decree, but by assumption. At the heart of the widening rift was Tom Parker Bowles. Having described himself as a civil advisor in earlier press comments, Tom's presence at private palace briefings had become routine. He was not part of the sovereign staff, held no formal title, and bore no constitutional responsibility. Yet he was now reviewing press materials, coordinating Camilla's diary, and reportedly proposing new engagement strategies on behalf of the Queen Consort. Multiple insiders confirmed that Camilla had pushed, again, for Tom's title to be formally recognized. Her latest proposal, naming him Senior Special Advisor to the Queen Consort for Cultural Affairs and Public Outreach, a role that, while civilian in theory, would grant him regular access to official correspondence and briefings. This marked the fourth attempt to secure Tom an official position within the royal apparatus, and, once again, it was rejected. The refusal came not from William directly, but from the Privy Council office, following consultations with Lord President of the Council and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's constitutional secretary. The reasoning was simple. Such a title blurs the line between constitutional roles and familial loyalty, a precedent that could compromise public trust in royal impartiality. Camilla was furious. According to a source close to Ray Mill House, she felt undermined, sidelined, and disrespected. Her response was swift. She began restricting even more tightly the circle of those allowed to visit the king. By this point, even Princess Anne was being made to wait. Anne, known for her discretion and devotion to duty, reportedly requested a private audience with Charles on October 11 to discuss regency planning, only to be told the king was too unwell for guests. The decision came from Camilla's office, not from the king himself. Rather than escalate, Anne turned to diplomacy. On October 13, she invited both Camilla's and William's senior secretaries to a private session at Windsor, framed as a cohesion dialogue. There, Anne laid out the stakes plainly. This is not a family dispute. This is a constitutional transition. We must keep the lines clear. It was Anne's steady hand that diffused what might have become a full-blown palace rupture. She offered a compromise. Tom could assist his mother privately, but any reference to him as an advisor, official, or civilian would be publicly disavowed. William agreed. Camilla, after 48 hours of silence, reluctantly accepted but insisted on releasing a statement to clarify Tom's role. That statement, issued on October 15, read, "Mr. Tom Parker Bowles continues to support Her Majesty, the Queen, in a personal and family capacity. He holds no official or public role within the royal household and exercises no authority on matters of state." Though carefully worded, the statement marked a rare and humiliating retreat. Behind the scenes, even Camilla's aides acknowledged the damage had been done. What was intended as a move to amplify her legacy had instead sparked suspicion, fractured internal unity, and eroded her public standing. And while Camilla's influence diminished, William's authority expanded without proclamation. In the background, the Cabinet Office's Silver Branch Working Group was nearing completion of its Regency Readiness Plan. The Regency Acts of 1937 and 1953 required clear evidence of incapacity, something the palace was reluctant to declare formally. But under Silver Branch, a softer mechanism was proposed: regency in practice, enabled by the king's own written approval rather than medical declaration. The groundwork was already in place. William had assumed control over state briefings, foreign correspondence, the monarch's red box dispatches, key ceremonial representation. Anne, for her part, continued her tireless work, now liaising directly with Downing Street and quietly ensuring that no royal engagement clashed with political optics. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla began to withdraw. Her calendar was lightened, her appearances reduced. She no longer spoke at engagements, and in late October, She canceled a planned visit to a children's hospice, citing personal fatigue. Public sympathy had dried up. Her approval rating, once hovering above 50%, had collapsed to 28%, the lowest recorded for a senior royal since 1997. Within palace walls, a new rhythm had emerged. William led, Anne stabilized, Catherine comforted, and Camilla faded. And somewhere behind closed doors, King Charles, frail and surrounded by medical staff, watched it unfold, unable, or perhaps unwilling, to intervene. It was a foggy Sunday evening, the 2nd of November 2025, when a sealed envelope bearing the royal crest arrived at Clarence's house. The messenger, an aide in plain uniform, refused to speak a word beyond the phrase, "by the king's hand." Inside the envelope was a brief letter, handwritten in Charles's distinct, slightly wavering cursive. "Let duty prevail over sentiment. I entrust the stewardship of the crown to your judgment, until such time as I may resume it, or not. I men of fur." Witnesses describe Prince William reading the letter in silence, his expression unmoving. Beside him, Princess Anne folded her hands. Neither spoke. Both understood what it meant. The next morning, the Privy Council convened behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace under the chairmanship of the Archbishop of Canterbury. There were no photographers, no ceremonial signatures broadcast to the world, only the sound of papers being passed across a polished oak table. By unanimous agreement, the council accepted King Charles's written consent to a temporary regency in practice, invoking a constitutional precedent not used since the early 19th century. The king would remain sovereign in title, but executive royal functions, correspondence, ceremonies, briefings would transfer to the Prince of Wales. A short government statement followed that afternoon. His Majesty continues to rest under medical care. By his instruction, the Prince of Wales will carry out the functions of state on his behalf. There was no mention of abdication, no declaration of incapacity. The monarchy had entered a living regency, shaped not by crisis, but by compassion. Across Britain, the response was immediate. Commentators hailed the decision as graceful, humane, and pragmatic. Newspapers used words like dignified transition and quiet revolution. Public trust in William soared to 82%, while the king's image, now fragile yet revered, drew an outpouring of affection. But one absence stood out: Queen Camilla. She had not attended the Privy Council session. In fact, she had not been seen in public for nearly 2 weeks. Her office released a short statement the next day. Her Majesty the Queen Consort has departed for Florence, Italy, where she will spend time privately reflecting and supporting His Majesty's ongoing treatment. Ho! The explanation did little to calm speculation. Sources close to the palace confirmed that her departure followed an intense private disagreement with William over the handling of media access. Camilla had allegedly argued that the monarchy was losing control of its story. William replied, according to one aide, "It's not a story, it's our duty." Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, had also disappeared from the public scene. His last known appearance was at Heathrow Airport days earlier, boarding a flight to Rome. Palace insiders say his removal was mutually agreed after senior advisors warned that his continued visibility risked eroding constitutional confidence. In less than a month, the Queen Consort and her son, once seen as the king's inner circle, had been effectively sidelined. Meanwhile, the crown machine moved on. William began chairing weekly briefings at Marlborough House, receiving intelligence updates and foreign cables. Princess Anne, tireless as ever, managed logistics between the cabinet office and royal engagements. And Catherine, radiant yet solemn, re-emerged as the emotional core of the monarchy. On November 6, William addressed the nation from Sandringham, his first formal broadcast since the transition. Seated at a modest oak desk, dressed in black and navy, he spoke plainly. "My father remains our sovereign, and his wisdom continues to guide us. But at his request, I will carry the torch of duty on his behalf. This moment is not an end, but a passage one defined not by power, but by care." He paused, the faint flicker of candlelight reflecting in his eyes. Then came the line that would define his speech, and perhaps his era. "We do not inherit crowns. We inherit burdens, and we carry them together." The address lasted under 3 minutes, yet its impact was seismic. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed nearly 50 million times across global platforms. Leaders from the Commonwealth sent public messages of support. President Joe Biden praised the speech as a masterclass in dignity and democratic continuity. The tone of Britain shifted overnight. The endless speculation gave way to a collective calm, the feeling that, though the monarch was fading, the monarchy itself had found renewal. At Addenbrooke's Hospital, where King Charles continued his treatment under guarded privacy, staff noticed a change. One nurse recalled hearing the king whisper, "Are they managing well?" When told that William's speech had united the nation, the king smiled faintly and said, "Then all is well, M." It was perhaps the last word of assurance the nation needed from him. For Britain, the crown had not fallen. It had evolved, quietly, gracefully, without ceremony. A king's illness had become his final act of service, the peaceful transfer of trust to a new generation. And for William, the son who had never sought the throne so soon, it was the moment history chose him whether he was ready or not. By mid-November 2025, the once chaotic tempo of Britain's royal household had slowed to a quiet, steady rhythm. Gone were the swirling headlines about secret meetings, camera leaks, and constitutional uncertainty. In their place, structure, clarity, and a new kind of leadership. The monarchy, once shadowed by frailty and speculation, had begun to function again. Not because the king had returned, but because his son, daughter, and daughter-in-law had risen to meet the moment. At the center of this new dynamic stood Prince William, now operating as regent in practice. He had not taken a new title, had not sat upon the throne, and had not altered the line of succession. Yet, in all but name, he had become the monarch Britain looked to. Each day, William now receives and signs red box dispatches, chairs foreign affairs briefings, and reviews government legislation with the Prime Minister's private secretary. His schedule is meticulously aligned with that of his late grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, whose model of quiet, constitutional leadership he has begun to emulate. But William has also updated the tone. Under his direction, court communications are more transparent, less shrouded in euphemism. Each week, a one-page health bulletin is issued regarding the king prepared by the royal medical household and approved jointly by Princess Anne and William's private office. And while Charles remains sovereign, his public presence has all but vanished. Reports confirm he remains under supervised care at Sandringham, no longer walking unaided and receiving regular infusions. Aides describe him as mentally lucid, physically diminished. He has not appeared on camera since September. Yet his legacy, the transition he allowed to unfold without protest, has been hailed as an act of final statesmanship. In choosing dignity over defiance, Charles ensured continuity. Princess Anne, meanwhile, has emerged as the institutional engine behind the regency. Often called the hardest-working royal, Anne now serves as the monarchy's chief liaison to government, overseeing logistics for all interministerial correspondence. Her calendar remains punishing. 5 engagements a week, spanning military installations, educational visits, and overseas Commonwealth missions. But her greatest contribution is invisible. She is the quiet arbitrator, the one who keeps tempers cooled and egos grounded. A senior aide confided, "She's the only one every department trusts. She has no ambition, only duty." It is Anne who ensures that decisions made by William are executed with constitutional precision. It is Anne who ensures that Catherine is protected from burnout. It is Anne who has privately visited Charles more than any other royal since the transition. As for Catherine, her transformation has been the most poetic. What began as ceremonial duty ribbon cuttings, handshakes has evolved into something deeper. She is now the public's emotional anchor. Her speeches, though brief, often trend globally. Her quotes are printed on front pages, not because they are dramatic, but because they reflect the nation's mood. At a recent visit to an oncology center in Bristol, she said softly, "Families carry each other when one can't carry themselves. That's not obligation, that's love." It was a sentence that could have described her husband, the king, or Britain itself. Catherine now represents the soul of the monarchy, not its power, but its humanity. In an age of disillusionment with institutions, she has reminded the country what empathy looks like in a crown. And what of Camilla? She remains in Florence, largely out of public view. Her office maintains that she is supporting the king's recovery from abroad, but sources confirm she has stepped away from royal functions indefinitely. Her approval ratings remain below 30%, and her son, Tom Parker Bowles, has not appeared at any official event since late October. While the palace has refrained from comment, it is widely understood that her chapter within active royal life has quietly closed. There was no exile, no scandal, only silence, the kind that speaks volumes. In this vacuum, the next generation has not simply filled the gap, they have reshaped it. This is not a regency of protocol, but of purpose. Not a family clinging to power, but one relearning how to serve. In a sense, the monarchy has returned to its roots: symbolism, stability, and soft influence. No grand proclamations, no palace drama, just 3 figures standing shoulder to shoulder, carrying what is left of a crown once too heavy for one man alone. Britain, for its part, has responded with unexpected unity. Public faith in the royal family has rebounded. Surveys show 84% of respondents believe William is handling his duties well. Even among Republicans, the number who believe the monarchy should be retained for now has risen. Commentators refer to the current phase as the Regency of Grace. And the king? He is still king. His name still signed on currency, still invoked in Parliament. But the country no longer waits for his recovery. It hopes for his peace. In a photograph taken through the window of Sandringham's chapel, King Charles III was seen seated in a wheelchair, wrapped in a tartan blanket, hands folded over a book. Princess Anne stood behind him. The image was never officially released, but it found its way to the public nonetheless. One source claims that during a quiet moment, Charles looked toward the stained glass, depicting his late mother, and whispered, "They're doing better than I ever imagined." In the quiet corners of a monarch's decline, Britain has found something else a beginning. The crown has not passed. It has pivoted. And in that pivot, the monarchy has not only endured, it has evolved.